If you were Sega, what would you have done to celebrate the 60th anniversary? Well, certainly bringing out a new micro console is a great way of doing that. But instead of perhaps a Master System Mini, or a Dreamcast Mini, which would be awesome, Sega decided to release a very, very mini version of one of their revered Japanese arcade machines. Now, it has been tricky to get a hold of it in some regions, but it's very easy to get a hold of in the UK right now. So how's it turned out? How does it work? And is it worth getting? Hello fellow gamers, and let's take a look at Sega's Astro City Mini. Sega's done quite a bit to celebrate its 60th anniversary. You know, stuff like showing off exclusive interviews and giving away games on Steam. But something else they've done to celebrate their 60 years comes in the form of the Astro City Mini. So what is it? Well, it's another microconsole in what many would say is already an overly saturated market. Two mini microconsoles? Pfft, never. In a similar form factor to the Neo Geo Mini, it mimics the Astro City arcade cabinet that hosted many games on the Mini in its heyday. The microconsole holds 37 games across much of Sega's early arcade history. So it's an all-in-one classic Sega arcade machine. Nice! So let's have a look around this thing. Now the first thing I noticed when I got this out of the box was that large 16:9 display. And it's such a nice display. It's very bright, it's very crisp, it's very colourful. But it is weird that they've chosen this particular shape, a 16:9 aspect ratio, when all of the games are in 4:3. Couldn't they have just gone for a 4:3 display instead? Oh, hey up, the film's still on. Let's fix that. Healing feeling. Now, as this is mimicking an arcade machine, it's got its own built-in microswitch joystick and series of buttons. On the top we've got the name, the Sega Astro City, and all along the marquee, if you can call it a marquee, is a green light that illuminates when you boot it up and start playing games. Nice little touch. And in there, in order to complete it all, are two small but surprisingly powerful speakers. Down the sides we've got some lovely Astro City decals, and on the back we can find an array of different ports. So we have the power switch, HDMI out for 720p output, got two USB ports for wired controllers, got 3.5mm port for headphones, and a micro USB port for power. Now just holding the Astro City Mini in my hands, it's definitely not really that heavy. It's surprisingly light actually, considering what's in there, and it definitely feels like it's got a really good build quality to it. So what games are on it? Well, the Astro City Mini comes complete with 37 games from Sega's arcade history. Now, most of the games won't have featured on the original Astro City, but certainly on its predecessor cabinets in Japanese arcades. Now what I have here is the version of the Astro City Mini which was released in the UK, and it doesn't really seem to be any different than the Japanese release because all of the games are Japanese coin-op ROMs. Now yeah, most of them have enough English to let you play them, you know, without any hindrance. But there are a couple of titles where, well, if you really want to delve into them, you're going to need to get yourself either a lifetime subscription to Rosetta Stone or simply whip out Google Translate. The interface of the Astro City Mini is simple enough to follow, especially if you've used any other microconsoles in the past. You've got your list of games on the left hand side, you've got a series of screenshots on the right hand side, complete with a little bit of copyright and release information underneath. Selecting a game gives you a brief detail of what the game is, it also tells you what the controls should be, and it gives you the option to choose from any save data that you saved. So yes, this does have save states on, which you'll be happy to know. Now the system has a number of settings available, assuming of course that you're not running a game. You can't access these until you quit out of your game. But that includes stuff like the brightness of the built-in screen, volume of the built-in speakers, and you've got a couple of screen and wallpaper settings as well. The last two are interesting actually, because the screen settings gives you the difference between either the default view, which is more or less pixel perfect, and you've also got analog display, which puts a sort of blurry CRT effect across everything. Now anyone who's watched my past videos knows that I muchly prefer the pixel perfect option, but if you like that CRT effect, it's nice to have. And in the wallpaper settings you can see that Sega have tried to address the issues with them using a 16:9 display when all of their games are 4:3. In here you've got a couple of different banner options for the left and right hand side just to fill in that gap, but personally I'd rather just not fill it in at all. So I bet a few of you are asking, if that built-in joystick has micro switches, what's it like to control? Well, I can happily say that with every press of the joystick, it gives out a really nice, satisfying little click with every tilt. Sega have done a decent job here of emulating using a full-sized arcade machine in a very, very small form factor. The buttons are pretty satisfying to press as well. Perhaps softer than what you would find on a normal arcade cabinet, but they're still pretty darn close. So if you're playing single player, using the controls on the device itself is rather satisfying. In fact, I can say that I have played one or two of these games on the original arcades when I was younger, when they were new, and comparing the experience then to what I get from this, I have to admit, there is a little hint of that when playing on the Astro City Mini. There are plenty of games on here though which are 2-player, but you can't just play those with the system as it stands. You can only play 2-player by using a USB controller. Astro City provide their own, they're around about £20 each, and I think really all you're paying for is the ability to play 2-player. It's not strictly necessary to use one of these when you're playing just by yourself, because they certainly don't hold a candle to the built-in joystick with its micro switches. The D-pads on them are a little bit on the mushy side, but they work well enough, I guess. But really, when it comes to a micro console, it's really about how do the games play, how well are they emulated, and from what I can tell, the Astro City Mini doesn't disappoint too much. I mean, a lot of the games that are on here are ones which I've got to be honest, I'm unfamiliar with, so I couldn't really speak for how well they played before on the arcades. But I can say that every game on here seems to run very smooth, very fast, very clear. I also didn't notice any tearing whilst I was playing any of these games. But there is one instance where I can see the Astro City Mini struggling a little bit. When you have it connected to a TV over HDMI and playing Virtua Fighter, I did notice some slowdown from time to time, but it was mostly in the replays rather than in-game. So I suppose it's not really going to affect your gameplay anyway. Plus, Virtua Fighter is the most graphically intense game that's on the Astro City Mini. So if there's going to be any title that's going to be pushing the limits of this thing, it'll be this. Something else I noticed too is that there are 1 or 2 games on here which were designed for vertical displays rather than horizontal. Sonic Boom is one that springs to mind. The problem with these kind of games is that the vertical display is scaled down to a horizontal one, a very small horizontal display at that. So everything looks very, very small when you're playing on the Astro City Mini itself. It's not quite so bad when you're outputting it to a TV, but you don't have the option to rotate the screen, so you're not able to play it with an actual vertical display. I think really someone who has played all of these games on an original arcade cabinet would be able to give a better answer to how the games run on the Astro City Mini. But as someone who has experienced a couple of these games on actual arcade machines, I can say that besides the couple of hiccups I just mentioned, they all work extremely well. But there's something I need to mention here is that all of these are coin-op ROMs. They are all games straight from the arcades. Now I mention that because arcade games are designed to make money. They are pretty damn hard. One example I can give you is in fact Virtua Fighter again. On the Saturn, I can make my way all the way to the end and face off Dural and finish her off. but on the Astro City Mini I cannot get past Pi. She is way too fast for me. Thankfully, unlike actual arcade machines, this isn't going to cost you a small fortune after buying the actual system. You can just keep on pressing the credit button in order to increase your credits, and you can just carry on playing as long as you want. So like any system, it has its highs, it has its lows, but ultimately it all depends on one thing. Is it worth it? Well, to summarise, I have to say it's a nice little bit of kit. It's extremely well built. I really appreciate that they've put a microswitch joystick on the device itself along with the appropriate buttons. The display is really bright, it's really sharp, it's really colourful, and I've really enjoyed playing a number of these games on here. But I've got to admit, as nice a job Sega have done with the Astro City Mini, it's a bit expensive for what it is. If you're after one in the UK, you're looking at around about £130 or £140 for just the system alone. The other issue I have with this as well is that a lot of these games, they are very Japanese centric. That's not entirely a negative, I'm sure they are perfectly fine for the Japanese market. But not all of these games were outstanding titles over here in the West. I don't think titles such as Puyo Puyo was ever popular over here until Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine was released. And I imagine anyone who doesn't know Japanese is going to struggle with Wonder Boy in Monsterland. However, they have included some great titles in here such as Space Harrier, Golden Axe, Virtua Fighter of course, and they've even included the arcade exclusive Golden Axe The Revenge of Death Adder. So I think, like with many of the micro consoles that have been released in the past, the Sega Astro City Mini does cater to a bit of a niche market. But in this case it's probably even more niche, because we're talking about classic Sega arcade games here, and not a lot of them had decent ports on consoles at the time, if they had them at all. So plenty of titles here have likely not been played by a lot of people outside of Japan. So I hate to say it, but it really comes down to what you might expect from a system like this. If you're really into Sega's classic arcade games and you've got the money to front up, then it will be worth it. But for anyone outside of that, I would say give this a pass. But I can appreciate the effort that's been put into making this. It's a really nice solid bit of kit. Which is why, instead of it living in my gaming room, I'm going to have this at my desk at work. I reckon it's going to be pretty nice. Between projects I can just spend 5-10 minutes just playing on a classic Sega game on a tiny little arcade machine at my desk. That's going to be really sweet. So there you have it, those are my thoughts on Sega's Astro City Mini. It's a really nice micro console, but it does cater to a bit of a niche market. But you know, if other micro consoles show up in the near future that really interest me, you know, fine well that I'm going to pick them up. So if you want to see more videos like this, be sure to subscribe down below. But what are your thoughts on the Astro City Mini? Did you pick one up? Did you like it? And what are your favourite games on here? Let everyone know down below in the comments. But with that, I'm going to sign off now, so thanks very much for watching. Please leave a like if you like the video, and I'll catch you all next time.